chatting with Fred Lynch about his current exhibition at the Anna Maria College Art Center called Drawing All Over the Place. I am really excited to chat with Fred Lynch today. I'll just tell you a little bit about Fred. Fred is a professor of illustration at the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island. He's an award-winning illustrator. Fred's works for major corporations, magazines, publishers, and newspapers have been seen nationally and internationally. His paintings have been included in many national juried shows and regional exhibitions. And in partnership with Urban Sketchers, Fred has taught drawing workshops in Italy, Spain, Portugal, England, Holland, and Brazil. His drawings have been featured in a long list of books and publications. Fred and his work were also featured in Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern, the Travel Channel's most popular show. So Fred grew up in Rhode Island and he now lives in Winchester, Massachusetts. So let's bring Fred into the call.
Here I am.
Here he is. Hi, Fred.
Hi.
Good
How are you?
afternoon.
Nice to see you.
Oh, we've got a little lag. That's too bad.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, now
So-
it caught up. So we're
Okay,
good.
maybe it'll just make it exciting. Let's see.
Yeah. So I was looking at your bio, Fred, and tons of exhibitions that you've been a part of, and really, really interesting, beautiful work. I was scrolling through some of them and I just thought, oh my gosh. And I have to tell you a little story. And that is, I think it was in Barcelona, maybe not, one of the Urban Sketchers symposiums. I had to interview somebody and you were speaking at the symposium. And I forget which, I think it was Barcelona, but I'm not sure because I
Right, it
didn't
was
mention
Barcelona. That's right. It was Barcelona.
And so somebody went in, and when they came out of the talk, which I missed, I said to them, wow, how was the Fred Lynch talk? And they said, it's amazing. It was so amazing. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I missed that.
Wow.
I know.
Somehow I feel I missed it too, if it was that amazing. But all right, well, let's see. It was very funny because we had a translator and it became a comedy routine in a way because the translator had trouble keeping up with me. So that became a running joke. But It was very fun. It was still very fun.
Oh, good. That's good. So your exhibition, the theme is drawing all over the place. And I think the title kind of tells it all. And I was looking through some of these images and just thought how beautiful they are. So I think, first of all, we want to talk because the first thing that people are going to notice is that all of these works are in black and white or sepia. So maybe you can tell a little bit about your materials that you typically use.
Sure. So I use a number of materials, but I'm most known for monochromatic works. And that's for a couple of reasons. We'll talk a little bit about thematically why I pick the media that I do, but just practically, believe it or not, I'm an artist who's colorblind. And colorblindness is very common in men. It's 1 out of every 10 men are colorblind. And it doesn't mean that you don't see color, but it does mean that color is not your strong point. So if I'm sketching and I'm working along making decisions on site, it aids me a great deal to not be worrying about something that I'm very challenged by. So I spend a lot of my time, excuse me, working on the drawing and working on monochrome because I'm very interested in how light works. Dark, light, shadow, that's very, very important to me. So I use it for practical purposes. And then also I use it for thematic purposes. So a lot of my work is referencing history or talking about art history. And there's a long, long history of sketchers that go back to the Grand Tour period and beyond. These sketchers that were going to Italy from Northern Europe or going to Spain, they're mostly going from Northern to Southern Europe. And they were using brown inks and monochrome work. So my work is kind of referencing that and making an update on that. So there's a couple of different reasons why I use that.
Okay, cool. Well, for people who thank you for everyone for coming, and just to let you know, what we're going to do is have a little virtual exhibition. So if you weren't able to make it to Fred's exhibition at the Anna Maria College Art Center, he's going to personally walk us through and talk about each one of his images that is hanging there in that exhibition. So let me share my screen now, and we'll pull up these images. And so Fred, if you wouldn't mind to turn off your camera.
Sure.
Yeah, so tell us about this image. This is one of the images hanging in your exhibition.
Yeah, this was selected as the poster image for the exhibition. You're going to see a lot of sketches today, but this actually isn't a sketch, in that I obviously didn't draw this on site. And I think that's an important thing to talk about today. And that is that I'm a sketcher, but I'm also an illustrator. So I use sketching as part of my process. It's not the entirety of my process. I come from the illustration world, and illustration is creating artwork that as a form of communication, to tell stories. It's work for publication. It's work for sharing ideas. So there's always a concept behind what I'm making an image for, and sketching really aids that rather than it being an end in of itself. So when we look at this cover, a good part of the work that I'm doing now, and we'll talk about it as part of my exhibition when we see some of the artworks, is I've been drawing the ancestral homes from my family. So I've been tracking down places in America where my immigrant ancestors lived. And I'm making a kind of family tree. That led me to this image, which is a kind of a self-portrait in a conceptual mode. It's kind of a way of capturing how this is how I kind of view what I'm doing. I'm going down, and following these families, and they end up being really a tangled mess. I mean, it's extraordinary how many discoveries you make when you do ancestry. And it has really been eye-opening and a wonderful subject for sketching. So that's what this image is about.
Super cool. I love it. Okay.
And these are the images I'm kind of known for, and I should explain these. So first of all of my artwork is started on site, and a lot of the work you'll see today are my really finished, refined, detailed images from Italy. I had the great fortune of teaching in central Italy for 13 years. It's kind of on hiatus now, but for 13 years, I was teaching a college course, and part of a college program. And when I wasn't teaching, I was sketching. I was walking around and exploring central Italian towns, usually towns that are not as well known, not Rome and Florence, but rather smaller cities like Viterbo and other places that are even less known than that. And what I do is I would walk around really kind of seeking serendipity. Research is a big part of my practice. In my Italian work, I would find something that I found utterly captivating, sit down, try to capture it on paper as fast as I could, and then I would snap the appropriate photographs that I needed to finish it back home. So my work starts with sketching and ends with illustrating, because my work really is being exhibited not as sketches, but rather as visual correspondence. I'm like a journalist or a discoverer or a reporter who's on site. So here's a building. I have this habit that my wife doesn't really enjoy, that I walk into courtyards uninvited. So you can see down there where the road was. And by the way, I have a cold, so you'll hear me coughing now and then. I kind of went through this building and came to the other side, and this is what I faced. It was just jaw-droppingly beautiful. So I draw for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, drawing and putting down washes of brown ink. And then again, I snap the pictures that I have and come back. And what I do is I then research that place that I've drawn. I'm always very fascinated. So what was that? And I often find really interesting things. So this drawing is from the city or town of Narni, which claims to be the exact center of Italy. I don't know how you can do that, but they also claim to be the inspiration for the name Narnia, which C.S. Lewis used in his children's books.
Right.
And this is an old apartment building that was a very important residence in its day. But I love capturing both the beauty of it, of what it is, and then also the decay of what it has become. So whenever I draw these things, I know I'm not working for the tourist bureau, so I'm not afraid to draw trash cans.
As you see it.
Yes, I see. I'm, as you can tell, I talk a lot, and when I draw, I talk a lot in my drawings too. So I don't think of it as detail. I think of it as more explanation. So
Yeah.
a lot of sketchers are known for being fast sketchers. I would say that I would be known for being a long sketcher. I would call it taking a very long look at something.
Okay, cool. I love this one.
Here's a very fun day that I had where it's the same exact town. This is also Narni, but leaving town, the sun moves, and I'm no longer able to draw the building the way I wish it to because the sun moves across the sky. And in this one, I sat up on a hilltop, which was really a church stairs, and watched as a town awoke after its siesta period in the afternoon when everyone just goes away and rests. This was a Sunday afternoon, and I call it wedding day because as I drew, a wedding was being formed and then happening behind me. The only wedding guest that you see in here is in the absolute center of the piece by the fountain there. There's a woman in black. She went to the wedding, but everybody was coming and going. And when no one was around, I would draw the background. And then when someone came by, I would quickly sketch them in. So those people were never in the same picture ever, only in my picture.
Right.
So it was very, very fun. There's only one man who is drawn twice. That's because he was an old man and he tended to move slow and stay put a lot. But this is really a portrait of a town waking up and moving around, and it's very fun. I find it very fun to explore. I don't draw a lot of people on my pictures, but when I do, I love the capturing them as they come and go.
Cool. I love it. This sketch is called Busy Town.
Yeah.
The kids' books, I guess.
That's right. Another thing I really love to do, and I taught a workshop about this for urban sketchers, is I like to do lists of things where you're not really drawing a picture. You're not really, well, you're drawing a picture, but you're not drawing a scene. It was in a really unusual cliffside Italian town that of a medieval period when it was built, that I fell in love with the doors that were on the streets. In that town, and maybe in some of the works that you'll see, we see that medieval architecture, no one lived on the ground floor. They lived on the second floor, and you would have a long staircase that goes up to the second floor. The staircase would be on the outside of the building. But I loved these unusual doors that were on the ground floor. I thought they were so interesting because they have these grids. They almost look like modern paintings or something, like the way that they have all these fun vertical shapes. So this was all done on site. I spent a whole day going from door to door, and I think I started with the middle one, and then I would fall in love with a door and say, okay, I'm going to put that in there. And then I somehow made a grid out of that, hoping that they would have both variety and that they would look good as a group. So they're all drawn right on there, and they have the little address written underneath it. But it's easier to finish a sketch for me, a slow sketcher, if I'm only drawing a door.
Yeah.
But I think it's such a fun character of the town. What's funny is, I don't know if other people who are watching have ever experienced this, but it's not uncommon for me to be drawing. Particularly, this happens in Italy, when someone will tap me on my shoulder and tell me I'm drawing the wrong thing. And often it's an old lady or an old man who says in Italian, and I can kind of figure it out. I don't speak very good Italian, but I can figure it out that they're pointing around the corner to the beautiful piazza or the beautiful church that's around the corner. And they say, you know, you're drawing the wrong thing. There's a beautiful church around the corner. I think I worry that they worry I'm making them look bad
I see. Yeah.
by drawing the ugliest things in town. So it's really funny. I guess I'm excited by, I guess, the things that are a little less touristy and a little more personal. I'm really obsessed with drawing things that need me. So a sailboat on the water at the sunset, that really doesn't need a painting to be special. I'm much more of someone who's interested in adopting things and trying to make them interesting, or finding them interesting because of their quirkiness, I think.
So you're the person who's pointing out and saying, look at how amazing this thing is. Don't overlook it. Come and have a look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stop. Yeah, I like people to look and say, wait, what?
Yeah.
They find a drawing beautiful, but then they realize that they're really looking at sometimes a pile of trash that I'm drawing, but only because I like how it looks. So
Fred, you said that people in this town live on the second floor, and these were the doors to the first floor. Is that because that's where they kept the animals down below?
Yes, exactly right. So
Okay.
underneath would be the animals, and nowadays you'd put your scooter down there, or you'd come in. That's a storage.
I see.
And
I think this one is really interesting because you see a lot of this kind of tree, which I have no idea what it is, in Italy. And you've somehow been able to make two trees, a light standard and a bare wall look interesting.
Yeah. The town that I was centered in mostly, where I taught, was called Viterbo. And it's a medieval town, and it doesn't attract many tourists. But it's actually a city. It's a walled city. And I would walk by here all the time. And just at some point I realized if I just looked at it the right way, I could capture all these tall, narrow, slender sticks that go up. Some of them are natural and some of them are unnatural. The wall is really, really high. I mean, obviously that's the point of the wall. And these are, we call them umbrella trees. I'm sure they have a more proper name, but the trees are fantastic. In Italy, they don't necessarily grow that way. You can see that I wanted to describe how they clip the branches off bit by bit as they're growing. And the idea is that you can see a long distance under one of these trees, but still get shade.
Right.
So they're really, they're set up for viewing. And they're so fun. They look like Dr. Seuss trees to me.
Totally. The truffula trees.
Yes, exactly. They're
Cool.
really, really fun and unusual.
And I think you've really made them special because everything in this sketch is curved.
Everything is curved. So people ask me, why do you warp things? And I sincerely am trying to capture what I feel about what I'm looking at. So we'll see drawings where a house is on a hill and it feels like it's barely hanging in there on that hill. Or in this case, I'm trying somehow to make it look like you're looking up at it and have the sensation of kind of looking down and looking up. Because when I draw, I'm looking down at the bottom of the tree and drawing that, and then looking up at the top of the tree. So all my drawings, if they were photographs, would be many, many photographs to capture this. This is really purely a drawing view of looking down and then up. Some of them are looking left and right. I'm never satisfied with just one snapshot view. They end up looking like a snapshot view, but the warpiness, I think, has to do with the fact that I'm kind of looking left and looking right and looking up and looking down. Plus,
well, and also it's so much more charming.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
So here's what they look like when I really leave the scene. So I don't want anyone to think that the last drawing was completely finished on site. That's not. This is what they look like when I finish on site. And then I have, I don't know, 10 photographs this is a big wide scene of 3 trees on a lake. And what I want to capture, which is what every sketcher is trying to capture, is you're trying to capture that moment. For me, it's like, I really loved, I love the pattern of these trees. Again, you can see that I like the lights as much as I like the trees, just like the last picture. And I like the little benches. And I want to capture how they're kind of quirky trees, they're kind of fluffy, and the light hits them a certain way.
Mhm.
And I never got to finish this piece. I could have gone back the next day, which is what I do sometimes, or then used photographs to make a more developed image. But this is really truly an urban sketch, so it should humanize me to those who think they can't possibly make what I make. It's a lot easier than you think. I'm making the same as everybody else when I'm on site, and then going back and really pushing it. So this one looked like the previous one, except I was able to go back in for a few more hours and really describe the light and the leaves and the holes in the door and things like that. This is a humble doorway in a very humble town that I thought is such a wonderful arrangement of shapes.
It's so
um,
charming.
yeah, it's so funny. And people come and go, and they come out and they see me drawing, and what's really funny and very satisfying, again, I bet other sketchers have had this happen to them. I'm sitting across the wall, I guess you'd call it a street, although it's only as wide as one car. I'm sitting there, and people will come out of the house, look at my drawing, then turn and look at their own house as if to look through new eyes, because they don't think of their house as worthy of a painting,
Yeah.
And they usually look more surprised than pleased. They just look like, well, okay, if you think so. And it's really funny. And I did an interview with an arts community in Italy, and they said, you know what? You draw Italy like an American. And I didn't know what to say other than I am an American, so I guess that's bound to happen.
Yeah.
But I think an Italian, I guess, wouldn't draw this, but I think it's just the most fun
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
I love remembering after the fact that they
Yeah.
put their plants on these blocks,
Yeah.
and they come out and they water the heck out of these plants, and the water runs down the street. It's just so fun.
Yeah. So I can't remember if at the beginning you said this, but what are the materials that you're using for a sketch like this?
Okay, so I start with really good paper. I can't emphasize enough that you want to have a really good sketchbook or a really good piece of paper. So
Such
I use
as?
Stillman and Burn sketchbooks with the heaviest weight paper,
Yeah.
and we'll see some of those. But this is Arches heavy duty watercolor paper with a natural finish. It's not too bumpy, and you buy sheets of it, and I cut it up into, I don't know, 4 or 6 sheets from a big piece of paper. I cut them up.
Right.
And then I put that piece of paper on, I don't know, some sort of like little piece of light board that's on my lap. And I sit in my collapsible stool. I have a great stool that comes from Sweden. And in the advertising, it shows that it can hold a Volvo station wagon. So I feel very safe. I'm not going to fall on, the stool's not going to break. And I carry a satchel, a messenger bag full of supplies. The ink that I'm using is a nut brown ink from Winsor Newton, which can be very difficult to use because it has a little bit of a lacquer in it what I like about it is you can layer and layer and layer and get dark. It is waterproof. So I do a lot of washes. I go over and over and over again. Like I really test the patience with how I do that. And the drawing itself is done with a mechanical pencil. And I use a thin mechanical pencil because I don't want to have to sharpen pencils all the time. I used to do that. And then that got really old. I got sick of sharpening pencils. So now I just click my mechanical pencil very thin.
Yeah.
And I start with pencil, then I throw in a wash of ink. Sometimes I use walnut ink, which is actually made from walnuts. And that's also a wonderful brown ink, but that's not waterproof. And then sometimes I use, excuse me, Noodler's ink. And Noodler's ink is a brand, and it's for calligraphy, but you can use it for drawing too. The thing that I don't like about Winsor Newton brown ink, and Winsor Newton knows this because I've contacted them a number of times, is if you put too much water in your Winsor Newton inks, the colors will separate. So sometimes you'll see in my works that the brown has turned into like purple and yellow and separated in a really weird way because they're not using natural pigments all the time. And that drives me crazy, but then I can scan the artwork and then turn it back to brown if I need to. But I really love that ink for layering. It's very good for making tight little lines because it's thick ink. I use red sable brushes, which are more expensive than other kinds of brushes. But if you have good paper and you have good brushes, you are well on your way to making a good piece, because paper and brushes make a huge difference on the results.
So just a little question about your technique. So you've got your bottle of ink, whatever the brand is, and you've got your sable brush. You're not dipping right into the ink.
No, I have like a, imagine if you have an art kit and you pull out that grid, that plastic grid that people use for holding their pencils and their water, and their pencils and their erasers. I will fill one area with water, one of those little squares, or you could use like a little watercolor tin. I put a little water down, and then I have my ink right next to me. And I usually dip from water to ink, swirl it around in like a watery ink mix. I don't go straight to ink.
Right.
I water down the ink and go from there. And you can see me going from light to dark.
Okay, so you're making a little watered down pool of ink and ink and water, and then you're layering in over and over to get the darker tones.
Exactly. And anytime it looks light, you can see that my first marks are still there. I like leaving some of the early light marks there. I like balancing a lot of detail with areas where I leave it alone. I feel like it makes it more human, because I'm not really drawing photographs. Right. Well, this one looks photographic, but
it does.
This was also in my show. This represents a week of drawing. So beware, people. This is me near the rooftop of the school I was teaching in Viterbo. And this is 3 big pieces of paper that I made into a triptych. So I spent on and off for a whole week just drawing the left, middle, and center. I wanted to make a triptych with the understanding or the desire to make each of the 3 drawings interesting in and of itself.
Right.
And yet form one image, if almost connected. So this is a ridiculous amount of hours. This is almost an uncountable number of hours. And I keep finding that there's some sort of next thing I want to try to pull off. I'm not quite satisfied repeating myself. So especially if you're drawing in the same town for 13 years,
Yeah.
you've drawn almost everything. Like you go by and you say, oh, that's really cool, but I've already drawn that.
Yeah.
So that's when
You
I
set
started
new
doing this.
challenges for yourself.
Yeah. And again, complete honesty, some of them don't work out, and they're not the ones I'm showing you today because I want you to like me. I think it's really important for you to know that not everything doesn't work out. I think the more
Right.
practice you have, and I've had a lifetime of practice, the more you're able to hide and fix your mistakes. I think that's the biggest difference between me and a beginner.
Yeah.
So this is looking out the window of my apartment in Italy, and you could argue that's not very pretty. So it was a really kind of ugly, dirty, ratty, smelly courtyard between these buildings.
Well,
But
you're
every
making the
day,
life of a professor seem so glamorous there, Fred.
I know. But I did love that at noon, almost like in a magic way, the light would come through and make that line. I thought that was almost like, I don't know, almost like a light that's coming through in a spectacular movie or something. The light came down and made that beam every afternoon.
Cool.
So because I lived here, I could just lean on the windowsill, which isn't drawn. I'm only showing what's outside. I could just show a piece of that building and every day try to capture that light, which was so special.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I know all you sketchers know this. When you do a sketch, particularly if you stay there a while, you remember every single thing.
Yeah.
About what happened when you made that sketch. So I know that in that bottom right window, there were people making spaghetti sauce for a restaurant every day. I smelled basil tomato sauce every day and heard the pots and the pans. And they were making so much every day that I knew it couldn't possibly be home cooking. And then in the top left, that skinny little window, there was a woman who would put out the laundry every day, and she did the laundry every day, and she would put out the laundry that matched color. So there would be red day, and then there was blue day, and then there was purple day, and then all black day. It was really funny. Every day that the laundry was hung out was a different day. So as an illustrator or as a sketcher, you're almost a spy.
You're like a detective.
Exactly. It's almost like Rear Window for the movie Rear Window, where if you're stuck there and you're looking out the window a long time, you see a lot of drama, which is really quite fun. Nothing notorious, but everything is interesting.
And so that family who lives in that home, if you could probably predict who lives there, because the day before you're going to see everybody wear all red.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's right. That's funny. The next day, yeah, they're all set. Yeah, it's red day.
That's great.
So here's a self-portrait of sorts. That's my hand. I'm left-handed. And this is kind of what it's like, sitting by the side of the road, watching people come and go and capturing the light. This one was finished more on site, so it's a little messier. It's not very messy, but it's a little messier. I'm a real sucker for how the light splashes across the wall. Every day in July in Viterbo is a sunny day.
Yeah.
And every day is a dry day and not a humid day. So the light, as described by every other romantic will describe, the light there is very, very crisp and clear. And it's very different than my light here in Boston, which is kind of a soft light most of the time because we have more humidity here.
Right.
So you always see these big diagonals, and I will pass by these sites many times and think, oh, that's not that interesting. And then come by just at the right time of day where I say, oh, now that's interesting. And then I'll just stop there.
So I think what you are doing, though, because you're not paying a lot of attention to color, is you're able to pay more attention to texture.
Yeah.
You can see, all the texture on the walls and stuff, and the light dark contrast.
Yeah, it's
Um,
called value.
yeah.
When you're in your painting classes, they call it value. Yeah, and I am obsessed by value. I might even be, excuse me, hypersensitive to it because of my deficiencies in color.
Yeah. It's
Maybe.
fantastic. Fantastic. This one, I love this one so much because there's such a whimsy to it, and there's a charm, and like the whole thing, it's sort of a little bit crooked, and there's these crazy, I don't, there's probably a special name for these three-wheeled
Mm,
vans.
yeah,
What is it called?
it's called an ape.
Ape.
Yeah, and it's spelled ape, APE.
Okay.
The brand is ape in this case. And yeah, they have a motorcycle engine and a steering wheel. They're so small, but they're a truck. And here's an example of the fact that this is a painting that's about a truck and about a wall and about a clothesline, but really it's a painting about rectangles and squares. So when I'm looking, I sometimes don't understand until I'm midway through or even done with a painting that I understand why it was so attractive. Well, first of all, I think those are the cutest little trucks in the world. They're like, I don't know, everybody like tugboats. I like tugboats, and these little earnest little things. I just love that they're so cute and fun and hardworking and humble. I think they're a riot, and they make a funny sound. And I just loved that. I wanted to do a portrait of it, and I didn't realize after the fact how many rectangles and squares this was about. So it kind of works abstractly, but it also works in being a portrait of this humble truck. It's really fun. And in this one, the light was not that bright. The light was very filtered, or maybe I was looking at a shadowed wall. I can't remember, but it's really not about the light. It's much more about the grid. It was really fun to paint. It's just a really funny car. And if you look closely, the wheels are a little off. I don't care about getting it correct, but I am obsessed with getting it right. And that makes no sense, except I draw things fast and kind of quirky, and I allow myself to have mistakes, like it's not quite straight up. The reason why they're not quite straight up is because it's almost impossible to draw a straight up line for me. So I just say, good enough. And I try to keep the spontaneity of sketching while overworking that or questioning that with a ton of details. So I'm doing both at the same time.
Yeah. Well, there's something about the dark at the bottom, and then it just goes light, just white to the top. Very eye-catching. I love it. And I love the charm of this little ape. That's fantastic. I love it.
I want to drive one.
Yeah, I know. I want one.
So here's here's an example. Pardon my coughing. I have a cold. Here's another example of me drawing by looking up, and drawing looking down, and drawing looking left, and drawing looking right, and then putting it all in one picture. So this would take about 10 photographs to make this one drawing. It's an exaggeration of the space, but again, it was all to serve this fun not underground, but kind of under a building, kind of a feel to the light, with all these doorways. I love all the different doors. They're just so many. It's like I've already isolated the doors in an earlier piece, but I just really love the doors and the windows.
They're all a different shape, different size.
Yeah, and they don't line up.
Based.
Yeah, American houses are really boring by comparison. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
They're so symmetrical. Oh.
Yeah. That's so great. Well, it looks like, somebody built whatever this is. Is this under a bridge, or it's just a?
It's under a part of the house.
Okay. So somebody built that first part, and then they added on another part, and then they added on another part.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just gets added on, and everything in this medieval part of this town matches. It's all the same stonework, all the same woodwork. So everything, even though everything's kind of different, it all really holds together by being all the same kind of wood and rock and proportions. The proportions are different there. The proportions are really human. size. They're not like in America or Canada where everything is far away and distantly between each other.
So this door on the far left, is that for people? Like, I think it looks like you
Yeah,
have to bend down.
that's one of those. That's one of those doors where you have to dip your head to go in there.
Yeah. So this
look
piece
at
is called the wine door.
Yes.
And why is it called the wine door?
I have a very good but too long story for that, but I'll give you the punchline anyway. And that is, as I was drawing here, people kept showing up to that door that's straight ahead with the light going across diagonally. People kept showing up and knocking on the door and going inside and coming out with shopping bags. And after quite a while drawing, I come to realize that they were selling illegal wine in there. Some guy would get wine from vineyards and sell it without a license there. And they didn't like that I was drawing there. And I only figured that out later why. And it's because one man said, "Would you like a bottle of wine?" And I said, "No, thank you." But I talked to a colleague and they said, "You're crazy. That's great wine. You know, you go up, everybody goes to the wine door." So that's, excuse me, that's the story of that picture.
That's great. I love that.
This is under a castle, way below one of those arches. And I isolated just a piece of architecture. You can't really, just because it's a quirky shape.
Yeah.
But when you take it out away from the rest of the building, it just becomes a shape in and of itself, just these arches.
And is this the actual shape or did you exaggerate
No, this is the, excuse me, this is the shape. This is the shape, and it was really, really large. You would walk up the hill, the arch on the top right, you would walk kind of up that ramp, and then it gets on the top left, it gets a little flat, and you go in there, and that's where the nobility lives. And down here below, you just see a pile of sticks or a bunch of sticks against the wall and an old carriage there or something like that. So I'm looking from the underneath the front of a castle, which is really fun to look at it that way.
Wow. So probably if you were an architect, you could explain, how this is supporting the building. But for us, it looks like this can't possibly be supporting anything.
I agree. It's really quirky.
Yeah.
I don't even think I had too many angles on that. So those are all works from Italy. I found that after teaching in Italy for all those years, I really wanted to do some work that had to do with where I live. And I live near Boston, Massachusetts, and it's also historic, not ancient historic, but
I recognize this building.
Yeah, it's Paul Revere's house.
Yeah, it's green.
Amazing. You have a good memory.
Yeah.
So yeah, Paul Revere's house is in Boston, and I live about 5 miles from where Paul Revere rode his horse, calling out that the regulars were coming. He didn't say the British were coming, but because everybody was British then, but he was saying the regulars are coming, and it was the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. And for a short period of time, and an important period of time, this is where Paul Revere lived, and it's drawn from across the street. And to separate this American work from my Italy work, I used black ink, and this is also, this might be India ink. I think it's India ink, and it's the same materials, same brushes and paper though.
Yeah. Well, so we are going from Italy and now we're coming to America.
Yeah, now we're in Boston. So all of these drawings, these gray drawings, are about Paul Revere's ride. I like to draw in themes. I like to work in big series of work. So this is a pizza place, a famous pizza place. You have to go here. If you're in Boston, you have to go to Pizzeria Regina. It's probably one of the oldest pizzerias in the United States. And it's very fun. And Paul Revere did not go to this pizza place,
No.
but he rode in this neighborhood. This is the neighborhood that his house is in. You can still see I'm obsessed with the light and the strange architecture.
Mm-hmm.
This is
as much about the electrical wires as it is the building.
Absolutely. what I would do is I would do research as to where Paul Revere rode, and the roads that he rode on still exist in different form. And I would go there and come to the understanding that these ordinary places have extraordinary history behind them. So this is another pizza restaurant. And yeah, the most interesting thing to me was all these wires. But Paul Revere came to this point and then turned around. He almost was arrested at this point and turned around. So there's no marker. Actually, there is a marker across the street in a parking lot for a hotel. But it's kind of a funny, I don't think I would draw this. Excuse me. I don't think I would draw this if it wasn't historic. It's really, I find myself attracted to stories as much as anything else.
Cool.
And this is a very old mill. One of the oldest mills in the area. Paul Revere rode by. This part of this mill would have existed at that time, and they made picture frames. They particularly were known for their oval wooden picture frames. It's in Arlington, Massachusetts.
So I have a question here, Fred, about so what I feel like I'm seeing is a lot of control of the ink, more so than with watercolor, because with watercolor, the colors will interact with each other sometimes in really interesting ways. And sometimes you'll get like a floral bloom and so on. But here it seems to be a more consistent, like a very clean, consistent flow to your ink.
You're absolutely right. My work has very, very little spontaneity. And very little lack of control. So I would describe it as the first thing I draw is really fast and loose. And I try to capture what I think is really cool. So for this is I really like these boxes, all these just box. So interesting to me in dark and light. And that happens really fast, probably in a half an hour, I draw it all out. And then I start putting in careful washes of ink, and I stop being spontaneous, like really, really stop being spontaneous. And then at the very end, if I find that I've gotten too uptight, too boring, too photographic, too dry, and this one comes close to that, in my opinion, I will go back in and throw some more spontaneity into it, like those marks on the wall in the bottom, which were really there, but I had not paid enough attention to those. So I wanted to get back in some of the texture that I lost by being too careful.
Yeah.
But I am a slow and methodical worker. So the fast drawing is what makes this a kind of a loopy, curvy building.
And I noticed that the title of this building, you've named this building the Stone Building.
Right. It's really unusual. That is the name of the building, which is so weird. It's a completely wooden building called the Stone Building after some man named Stone, who made a lot of money as a glove maker in Lexington. This is on the edge of Lexington, Massachusetts. It's a very, very old building. For a while, it was a library. And now it's waiting for its next job. I drew this the day after the celebration of Patriots Day in Boston, which is about Paul Revere and Lexington and Concord. And on the ground, you can see a paper plate. In the foreground, in the very front, you can see a paper plate and some more trash. And that is because a parade went by and they hadn't quite cleaned up yet. And I just liked that it was there.
So I have a couple of questions about this sketch, Fred, and that is that I love how it all seems to be leaning slightly. It seems to be bowed out slightly, and the chimney and the middle seems to be going in the opposite direction. And the ground is curved, and I love all those things about it.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the windows generally in buildings in North America. Anyway, the windows are always evenly spaced, as you said, symmetrical. And here I can see that the ones on the right are a little bit more crowded and the ones on the left are farther apart. Were they like that, or did you do that?
That's called human error, Brenda.
Well, it's great though. I was thinking it's so much more interesting than if you left them all exactly spaced evenly.
Yeah, like I am not an architect. Nor do I think architecturally. I don't even obsess over perspective. I know perspective, but when I see some of my sketching colleagues teaching perspective, I am uh, um, um, overwhelmed by that. So I basically know the basics of perspective, but I want to draw more how it feels, and I want to draw it kind of fast, capture it.
Mhm.
And I inherently there are certain mistakes that happen, and I leave them there. So my paintings look unbelievably correct and finished, but upon closer examination, there are lots of mistakes. None of them are lies or faults, like there really were 5 windows. I try to get that right because I want to be accurate to the facts, but I'm not without the human touch. And I'm also obsessed with the fact that I'm not copying what's in front of me. I'm translating what's in front of me. I'm turning this into a drawing. So if you heard a fancier professor, they'd use the word defamiliarization. And that is when you draw something, you reintroduce it. It doesn't look as familiar as a photograph does. You basically say, look at this again, look at this new, look at this in a new way through a new pair of eyes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm not thinking of defamiliarization, but that's really the concept behind it. And that is a drawing. Simply put, a drawing or a painting is different than a photograph. So don't be afraid to let it be that. And that's really what I try to do, even as someone who does a lot of detail.
So at this point, we haven't had a lot of questions, and I think maybe people are just so captivated by what you're saying that they've forgotten. If you want to ask a question, people, we would be happy to answer them. So you can type them in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. And if you have anything that you want to ask Fred, and we will be happy to answer. All right. Now, these are pretty small, and people are going to have to really come close to the screen.
So these are pretty funny. There was a time when I was getting allergy shots, weekly allergy shots. And when you get allergy shots for, I'm allergic to pollen and things like that. And when I would get allergy shots, I would get my shot, and then I'd have to go back into the waiting room and wait 20 minutes before they let me go home to make sure I didn't have some adverse reaction. Right. So these are sketches of who happens to be sitting across from me in the waiting room at the doctor's office. And I must have done 100 of these because it was like years of allergy shots. And I only had 20 minutes, and people would come and go. And the piece was called "Thank You for Waiting." And these are all people waiting in a doctor's office. So again, it's really funny. It's like a portrait of the people that live, I guess, in my area, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's a different kind of sketching. I don't draw people all the time, but I really love to.
Super fun, really fun.
Yeah. And that was done in pencil. I'm colored pencil, like gray colored pencil.
Oh.
Okay. And this final work will pick up steam here for people. This is this matches really the poster for the show. These are drawings of my immigrant ancestors' houses in America. So I'm not going to bore you with the story of my ancestors, but when they came, I live near where a lot of them came to America. So they came to Boston or New York or Providence, Rhode Island. And I tracked down through old census works or other documents where they lived. And I find it completely fascinating because it takes me to neighborhoods that I would never go to in my own town. And I find that I'm drawing houses that still hold immigrants to America. So it's really an interesting phenomenon, and also very topical. I was doing these during the last presidential administration, where immigrants were being badly treated and badly talked about, and yet almost everyone from the United States comes from immigrants, including me. So I wanted to track that down and try to see that and examine that story.
Super cool.
And if your immigrants' ancestors were poor, which is really common, their houses may be long gone because a highway is there. So this is where the Lynches lived in 1901. That's now Route 95, the big highway that goes all the way from Maine to Florida. And this is in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. There's no house there anymore. So,
but the fire hydrant is still there.
He's still there, yeah, or she, yeah, that's still there. And this again is people drive by and they say, "What the heck are you drawing?" Like they can't believe that I'm drawing these unusual places. And this will become a book of some sort where I will show all my sketches and all the stories that go behind them. So there's a lot of stories that go behind them.
So we have a question here from Jian Sung, who's asking, Jian Sung is asking, would you say that the research or knowing about a place alters your view of the place that you draw? And if so, how?
So first I have to say that Jian Sung is like the best sketcher I ever met. Karen, she goes by Karen too. Hi, Karen. Karen is an amazing sketcher who has also taught with urban sketchers. So your anonymity is gone now, Karen. She's a former student of mine and is better at it than I am now. She's the teacher now. But anyway, yeah, I think it does, Karen. When I come, so let's talk about this piece. This used to be a mill. There was a tiny little mill on a river in Connecticut, and the Lynches came here first and worked here and had a horrible job working in a little rubber plant, little rubber mill on the Yantic River in Connecticut. The mill is gone. The only thing left is the wall. And they had a terrible life. They were working in the mills at age 12, 13, 14. And it must have been just really, really difficult, backbreaking work. And yet they had left Ireland, in that family's case, for a better life. I can't help but be a little sentimental when I show up and draw this. So I think if I have an affinity for the place, I have to actually negotiate. It's kind of a negotiation with the sentimentality that I might be feeling. I try to draw it as it is and try not to glorify it. I also try not to make it a pitiful drawing. I'm really trying to draw it straight, but it does make a difference when you know what the place is. There's no question about it. A big part of drawing, which I think Karen can speak well of, is subjectivity. So when we draw something, we're drawing our feeling of it, and we're not just drawing our view of it. We're not just capturing sight, we're capturing insight. And at least that's what I'm preaching and practicing. So no one needs to look at this and know what I know, but they will maybe when they look at it, get a depth of feeling. They'll say, well, somebody cares about this. Somebody has something to say about this. And then I often accompany it with some writing that gives it a little bit of context.
Cool. So
this house, I had some relatives living in this second floor here. And it's, again, these are very unglamorous houses, but.
So were your relatives particularly tall and thin?
This building was, no, my family is short and squat. But
so Fred, what is the name of this sketch?
I don't know. I forgot. It's the address. I think the address of the piece. This is in New London, Connecticut.
Okay.
It's probably called something Street, New London, Connecticut, or maybe the Lynches of New London, Connecticut, or something like that.
Right.
But again, I'm in neighborhoods that people don't necessarily go to make paintings. You know, I'm not by the seashore, and finding these unusual buildings very interesting. One thing I've been lucky about is that these funny houses, these immigrant houses, it turns out many of them are as interesting as the Italian houses. Although I'm really getting sick of the lines that you have to make in an American house. Those shingles, oh my God, they take all day. Just drawing lines.
Well, but then, you've got all those ceramic tiles on the roof. in
Oh boy,
Italy.
yeah. Those,
That's a
if
lot.
we zoomed in, you'd see I'm just putting in a couple of marks to say, yeah, tiles. But it's harder to do that with the shingles or with the porch spindles there. But I think they're important for describing it's a documentation, it's history. So I'm trying to get it right.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's super, it's just interesting. It's just like an interesting building.
Yes.
So anybody have any other questions for Fred? We're coming to the end of our images, so we need to pop them up now. Carol is asking, do you ever use masking fluid for some of your light features?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I don't. I like masking fluid. I know all about it. I have friends who use it, but I don't. Excuse me. I don't use it. I'm just maybe because I'm very controlled. I can leave the white of the page. The white is always the white of the page, as you know. Anyone who uses masking fluid, I'll tell you why I don't use masking fluid. Is because when you take that fluid off, like that rubbery form off, it is such a sharp and bright change from the other that it, to me personally, it's too abrupt, and I like a softer image. You know what I do? I have a couple of tricks though that I can share, and that is every single one of these pictures has a drip or a mistake or a splash that I regret. I use sandpaper instead of as an eraser for this paper. The paper is so thick. I have a friend who says you should buy paper that you could also shingle your roof with. And I love that line because my paper is so thick. Excuse me. My paper is so thick that you can use sandpaper. I can remember dropping my brush or something in the sky. I sanded the whole thing out of there, just sanded it out.
Wow.
And that's a good way to get back. You can't really go into the painting easily after you've sanded, but you can a little. So
Yeah.
even sometimes inside the painting, I've used it. But sandpaper is a great way to get ink off thick paper.
Super cool.
Yeah, or an X-Acto blade, just scratch away.
Yeah. Well, it is made of wood, right? So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Here's another thing that's really funny. I'll give you another example of my stories super fast. This is another place where my grandfather was born. My grandfather was born in a house that's not there anymore near Boston, Massachusetts. It's now a taxi cab station by the railroad tracks. And they have a taxi there that all the wheels are flat. And it's really, the whole place is in disrepair, and they were very poor, and it's just a fun place to draw. And I was drawing there. I was drawing I came inside the fence and sat there and drew. And as I was drawing, a car pulled up from the garage in the back, and the electric window went down, and the man said, just stood there. Just sat there looking at me. And I'm drawing, and I decided I'll just ignore that guy, And he kept staying there and looking at me and looking kind of angry. So I went over there and I said, "Hi, I'm an artist, and I'm drawing this wonderful cab you have here." And he said, he had a foreign accent. He said, "You no draw, And I said, "Oh, wow, I'm sorry. I already drew most of it. Is it okay if I finish?" He says, "No, you no draw." And I said, and I thought he was going to kill me. Like, he seemed like he was getting more and more angry that I had violated or trespassed on his property, even if I was only maybe 8 inches onto his property. I said, "I'm so sorry. I'll leave right away." And then he waited and waited and waited. And then it says, "Okay, you finish. But for now on, you ask. You always ask."
Okay.
I felt that I was lucky to get home alive that day. And I think sketchers have those stories. They're very funny stories that happen.
Oh, yeah. So we have a question from Kay Moore, who asks, do you ever take photos to preserve the lighting and finish off site?
Yes, absolutely. Kay, do it. I do that. Every single one of my most finished looking pieces, like this one, were aided after the fact by photography. And I do as much as I can on site. And then I go home and I take the photos, look at them and say, so what did I miss that's really, really important for telling this story? What did I miss? And I use the photographs to show and help to describe what I missed. And it might be the shape of flowers in front of this building, or it might be more details of the camper that someone parked in the back of their house. This is a 250-year-old house north of Boston. I know a true urban sketch is completed entirely on site, but I don't go by those rules with my work that I'm publishing for illustration. So I start with urban sketching and I finish with a more traditional artistic practice.
Cool. And this one here is Perat, Rowley, Massachusetts.
Yeah, Rowley, Massachusetts. It's an old Yankee town. And I discovered that my grandmother, who was from Nova Scotia, her family actually came very, very early in the colonial period of the United States. So I have ancestors that were in the United States in the 1600s.
Wow.
And one of them lived in this, not in this house. This house is very old, but not old enough. Lived in this place in the 1600s and was helped found the town of Rowley, Massachusetts.
Wow, so cool.
Very fun. And this was also in that area too. There was a shipbuilder nearby. The Story family was also very, very distant ancestors of mine from the 1600s. So this continues all the way from when my ancestor formed this as a shipbuilding, a boat building place. It is still a boat building place to this day, many families later. So this is near Gloucester, Massachusetts. Many artists have drawn in Gloucester, Massachusetts.
Okay, and that is the last
That's it
of your sketches. Thank you so much, Fred, for showing us your gorgeous art.
You're welcome.
That was really fun, really interesting, and so interesting to hear your process and how, what materials you use and just your life, sharing that with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really fun. And I think it's really fun that a bunch of my my current pals are hiding there, like Karen and others that seem familiar, that are out there. So hello to everybody. It looks like there might be one more question down there, maybe.
So Kay says thank you, and she loved it, and thanks so much, and I hope you feel better soon.
Oh, I hope so too. I was fine yesterday. Oh, this came all so fast. So thank you for your patience in my coughing.
No problem. So thanks so much, Fred. And thank you everyone for coming. And if you enjoyed this live interview and you're interested in upcoming interviews or demos or workshops, please consider subscribing to our newsletter. That's monthly. And you can do that by visiting www.studio56boutique.com, and there'll be a pop-up. And if you're interested in taking art classes while you're on vacation, just to let you know, we have some gorgeous vacation art classes coming up. Hazel Stone's vacation workshop in August in San Diego. Scott Christian Sava has a vacation workshop in October in Venice. Pat Southern Pierce is going to be teaching in Savannah, Georgia in November. And just this hot off the presses, we're planning a vacation workshop in Mexico in February with Stephanie Bauer.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of things. You won't find the Stephanie Bauer one on the website yet because we're still in the planning process. But to find out more about those exciting vacation workshops, visit our website.
Those are all very good artists. Yeah, they're all great artists. Yeah, I know a lot of them. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Fred. And thanks everyone for coming. Take care, everybody.
Have a great day.
Yeah, happy sketching. Bye for now.